birth of the blood bank begins with the birth of a child. "50 miles north of San Francisco, in the small town of Santa Rosa, California, Marie Farrar gives birth to a baby girl named Teresa at Santa Rosa's General Hospital. The child is healthy, but delivered by emergency C-section, and the mother suffers extensive blood loss. She hangs on the brink of death for several hours and is saved only after transfusions of blood from 14 local volunteer donors. Maria's husband, James, is a local business owner, a World War II veteran who returned home having lost both his hands. He is well known and well liked in the community. A few days after his wife's brush with death, James thanks each volunteer donor by name in the local paper for saving the life of his wife and the mother of his child.
Well, certainly the war brought people together and changed the way they looked at their community. And they knew they had to get ready for population boom. By the late 1940s, it was pretty evident. Because, you know, during the war, 7,000 soldiers and sailors were stationed for time in this town. And a lot of them came back. I mean, if you were from the Cleveland National Guard and you came out here in the winter, you didn't go back to Cleveland in the winter, even if you didn't marry a local girl, and lots of them did.
Cases like Marie Farrar's underscore the need for a centrally located community blood bank. With the closest blood bank 50 miles away in San Francisco, North Bay doctors must rely on a walking blood bank. That is, determining a patient's blood type, then locating matching donors and drawing and processing their blood. This method takes 4 to 6 hours or longer, virtually useless in emergencies. Within a few weeks of the Farrar family's close call, a blood bank association is founded in Santa Rosa. Members of the Exchange Club, a community service organization, the Sonoma County Medical Society, and more than 40 other civic organizations, mostly women's clubs, band together. Plans are set in motion to establish a local blood bank as a nonprofit community organization. The Board of Trustees will be an equal mix of laypersons and physicians, representing all the districts of Sonoma County. Local pathologist Dr. Owen Thomas is named as the medical director. Elected as the first president of the Board of Trustees is Exchange Club president, local insurance man, and beloved personality Fred Daniels.
When my dad and the others founded the blood bank, of course, they really had no idea that it would become such a big institution for the area. And I know that he was very, very proud of his involvement over the years because he did stay so active with the blood bank and never really backed away from it. He was right there all the time.
Fred was the focal point and remains the focal point. He just had that feel about him. He was a showman, and it created a great community business and brought a lot of good people together.
Soon after the initial meeting, the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors makes official its promised support of and participation in plans for a community blood bank. This new initiative quickly sparks controversy. The American Red Cross has also offered to establish a blood bank in the North Bay, but many fear a blood bank administered from a distance will not be responsive to local needs. For others, the Red Cross's program raises the specter of socialized medicine. But the Red Cross plan has its advocates as well, pragmatists who balk at spending local money on a blood bank when the Red Cross is prepared to operate one in the county for free. In a stormy 3-hour meeting at the Santa Rosa Hotel, the two conflicting plans are dissected point by point. Audience members argue with panelists and with each other. In the end, a vote is held by secret ballot. The North Bay community votes unanimously against the Red Cross and in favor of a community blood bank, built with local money and run by local people.
My father and the other founding members of the Blood Bank wrote a mission statement. The Blood Bank Association is a nonprofit organization instituted by representatives of more than 40 civic, fraternal, service, and professional groups from all sections of the county, which have recognized the crying need for a blood bank in the county to supply the life-giving fluid wherever it is needed to persons badly injured or seriously ill.
Just 2 months after the near death of Marie Farrar, the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank opens in the General Hospital on A Street. The location is temporary, and the members launch an aggressive drive to raise funds for a permanent home. They call for the financial and moral support of each and every resident of Sonoma County and dub their effort the All Out for $1 or More drive. The goal is to raise $25,000, enough to construct a building, buy equipment, and pay the salaries of technicians for the first year.
We would rather have 25,000 people donate $1 each to the blood bank than have 25 people donate $1,000 each. The blood bank must be a public service enterprise instituted by the people and operated for their benefit and for the benefit of their family and friends. Fred Daniels.
$1 buys a blood bank membership card and free blood typing. The blood is not sold, it is loaned. Anyone who needs blood will get all they need, and that blood will be replaced by donations from the family and friends of the recipient. The community rallies to fund the effort. Support comes from local business people, unions, church groups, and community organizations such as the Lions Club and the Sons of Italy. The effort is promoted by the Santa Rosa Press Democrat and radio station KSRO. June 8, 1948 is the official kickoff day for the fundraiser and is proclaimed by Santa Rosa Mayor Daw as Blood Bank Day. Donation tables and booths are set up throughout Santa Rosa in banks, department stores, and other local businesses. 80 members of the Sonoma County Medical Society back the blood bank with contributions of $100 each, giving the drive a much-needed boost, and the momentum begins to pick up.
For one thing, there's a beginning of urbanization for the first time. You know, originally, up until the war, 4 out of 5 people in Sonoma County lived in rural areas. They didn't live in Santa Rosa. Just 1 in 5 lived in Santa Rosa. And that changed in the 50s.
The following spring, after an extensive search, property at the corner of Montgomery Drive and Talbot Avenue is donated by Mrs. Genevieve Talbot and her son Leonard. Hugh Codding begins the construction, and by the time the building is completed, most of the labor and materials have been donated by generous local vendors. On August 2nd, 1949, the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank opens the doors of its brand new building. The first volunteer blood donor is none other than Board of Trustees President Fred Daniels.
He was well known. I can recall going downtown with him, and you couldn't even hardly walk a block because he'd have to stop and talk to people. And they very much enjoyed his company.
By 1950, the blood bank is delivering 250 pints a month to local hospitals. Whole blood lasts only 21 days in cold storage, so maintaining an adequate supply of blood is a never-ending struggle. The call goes out from local newspapers and the Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce, urging organizations and individuals to step up and donate regularly. Local cab companies even offer donors free taxi rides to the blood bank. Cash donations are solicited at Petaluma Leghorns football games, and ticket sales are brisk for fundraiser events. One such event takes place at one of Santa Rosa's most well-known landmarks. The 100 Years of Fashion Garden Party is hosted by Mrs. Mark L. McDonald at her home, at what is now known as the McDonald Mansion, with all the proceeds going to the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank. Gowns from decades past, as far back as 1850, are modeled by local women, all to the strains of live music provided by members of the Sonoma County Symphony. In its first year of operation, the blood bank draws almost 4,000 units of blood for Sonoma County hospitals. In these early days of the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank, most blood comes from a core group of repeat donors, especially those in the armed forces. In these pre-health insurance days, donors are building credit for themselves and the organization of their choice, should they or someone else need blood themselves. Tallies of units donated per individual are kept, and once it becomes clear that someone is keeping score, competitive pride kicks in.
I started donating blood probably around 16 or 17. I think you had to be 18 to just go on your own. But my mother signed for me and continued signing for me until I was old enough to just go on my own. Every time that I heard that there was a blood donation set up in my area, I made it there. I don't think I ever missed one that was in my area. And it made me very proud. I thought I was doing something that a lot of people in my community wouldn't do. So I went as often as I could.
Multi-gallon donors feel like VIPs, earning certificates and a write-up in the local paper. Repeat donors gain a sense of ownership and even possessiveness toward their blood bank, which for some counties will grow stronger as the decades progress, eventually getting to a place in the future where regulars arrive to give blood and sometimes grouse if they find another donor using their chair or watching their television. Around this time, a statewide California blood bank system is established, with the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank as one of its founding members. Medical Director Dr. Owen Thomas serves on its board of directors as president, and he is recognized at the national level for his part in the advancement of blood banking. International events touch the blood bank as well. It teams with the United States Armed Forces and the Red Cross to collect blood for use in the front lines of the Korean conflict. Fridays at the blood bank are set aside as Korea Days, and employees work overtime to meet the additional demand.
The newspaper got involved and began to run stories about how many pints of blood people were giving, and it was another source of great pride in the community of what volunteers could do, what fundraising could do.
The public rallies, and the many donors include employees of the Press Democrat, the Petaluma National Guard, and the Santa Rosa Hairdressers and Cosmetologists Association.
Socially and politically, it certainly changed Sonoma County. The 60s brought us the hippie movement at Morningstar Ranch. I mean, we were, second to San Francisco's Summer of Love. Our communes at Wheeler Ranch and Morningstar were news all over the country. It brought the gay movement to the Russian River, which was, for a time, a real financial boon to the Russian River area because it brought tourists back that had left when the automobile became a big deal.
During the 1960s, maintaining an adequate stock of blood is always a concern. More patients choose to pay for the units they've used rather than replace them, so repeat donors remain the backbone of the supply. Nevertheless, the organization continues to grow to meet the demands of the 19 hospitals in Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties. In 1963, an amendment is made to the blood bank's Articles of Incorporation. It states that should the blood bank ever cease to exist, its assets can only benefit a fund or group operated for religious, hospital, scientific, or charitable purposes. Though the blood bank is thriving and growing, its leaders show foresight in planning for what the future might bring. In keeping with its nonprofit status and community nature, they assure no one will ever profit from the blood bank's demise.
I like to think of the 70s as a kind of a back to the land movement here, which brought people whose mindset had been changed by the 60s to come out of the urban areas and come back to nature, as it were, and they settled in the West County, and it changed the demographics of this county, politically certainly, in a huge way.
The 1970s bring a time of transition and change for the United States, and the blood bank is no exception. Lee Sawyer is promoted to managing director after 8 years with the blood bank. In September of 1976, the blood bank's original medical director, Owen Thomas, dies. The California Blood Bank System, which Dr. Thomas helped to found, establishes an award in his name the following year. It will be given annually to honor individuals who make an important contribution to blood banking in California. In the late 70s, after more than a quarter century, the identity of the community blood bank is deemed in need of an update. A design competition for a new logo is held among the local high schools. The winning design by Santa Rosa High School junior Justine Johnson features a Redwood Empire Tree of Life, comprised of 3 blood drops representing Sonoma, Lake, and Mendocino counties. As the 70s progress, external forces put new pressures on the blood bank. Within the executive board, there is extended discussion of rising costs of malpractice insurance and the necessity for raising service fees to cover the costs. Nationwide, the blood bank situation is disorganized. 15% of the nation's blood supply comes from paid donors. This practice is largely to blame for the 17,000 annual cases of post-transfusion hepatitis. Because they profit from giving blood, donors routinely withhold the whole truth about their medical and travel history. In response, the FDA adopts the first national blood policy in 1974 to assure an adequate and safe blood supply to all Americans. It encourages the phasing out of the use of paid blood donors in favor of volunteer donors and regionalization of the blood supply using a community blood center model. It has taken almost 25 years, but the federal government now recognizes as a best practice the very plan that Sonoma County has had in place since 1949. The founders of the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank certainly could take some satisfaction in this affirmation of the community blood bank model, and for their decision, way back in 1950, to exclude paid donors. But a frightening new disease is about to rear its head, one that dwarfs previous concerns over hepatitis and syphilis.
This morning, the subcommittee commences the second of a series of public hearings on the safety of the blood supply of this nation. The blood industry and the government failed to prevent transfusion of thousands of pints of blood and blood products infected with the AIDS virus.
In the 1980s, AIDS explodes into the national consciousness. How acquired immune deficiency syndrome is contracted and transmitted is a subject swirling with controversy and misinformation. But fears of contracting it bring a decrease in the use of blood transfusions nationwide. Even on the national level, at the Centers for Disease Control, there is no consensus on the nature and degree of the risk, nor what should be done. Public safety and public confidence in the blood supply are both in jeopardy. At the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank, concerns over the safety of employees who draw and handle blood leads to new precautions. Though there is no AIDS vaccine, the blood bank begins providing hepatitis B vaccine to at-risk employees. All employees must sign a waiver stating that they have been informed and understand the consequences, whether or not they receive the vaccine. In this troubled context, Dr. Mark DeMeo steps in as acting medical director of the blood bank, and his volunteer position is made official on March 22, 1983.
When I was elected to this position as blood bank director, I considered a high honor. I had no idea what was about to hit me and the rest of the blood banks and the individuals receiving blood in the United States. The HIV virus at the time was an unknown, and we had no specific tests. So what we had to do was use surrogate tests in order to try to prevent the transmission of this disease process. We developed a number of strategies to go about this, and everyone was developing these things on their own. And talk about a cowboy time, this was it, and Cowboy Up was it. We were on top of a bucking bronco, and its name was HIV. And it was not only the alternative lifestyle or gay community that was a problem, it was the drug problem. And with it came hepatitis and a number of other things. So we concentrated on testing for things that were related to it because we didn't have a test for it.
As medical director, he institutes new policies at the blood bank. They make it harder for gay persons to donate blood, which provokes some anger, and DeMeo quickly becomes a target of attack from the local media.
I did not realize at first the pile of manure down the street was for me. I thought somebody just lost it off a load on a truck. But later on in the Guerneville newspaper, they had made a comment that that was for me. At the time, again, it was, you didn't know what was going to happen. If the manure was dropped there, what's the next thing it was going to be? What's the next shoe to be dropped? You know, it sounds kind of funny now, and it was after a while, but you know, it got kind of serious when people threaten you and do call you names and threaten. The blood bank got threatened in a number of ways, but the manure story was the best.
In response to widespread public fears over AIDS and other diseases contaminating the blood supply, the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank also institutes a designated unit program in 1985. Donors can now give blood and make it available to a specific designated recipient. In this way, patients who need transfusions can be confident knowing the source of the blood they receive.
In our region, which includes the San Francisco Bay Area, it was a difficult time for the gay community. It was confusing, and our medical direction was in place to make sure that we took care of patients, and sometimes that made it seem like we weren't taking care of our gay community because we had to set up some parameters. When the gay community stopped donating, some of the other donors actually wanted to stop donating as well because they were confused. Sonoma County, in particular, our donorship was very stable. We didn't lose a lot of donors. I think we came together to try to solve the problems.
I stopped donating blood when it was announced that they would no longer accept blood from gay men. Simply put, there was nothing I could do about it. I had mixed emotions about it, but I understood if they couldn't do the test to tell if there was anything wrong with the blood, why would you want to take a chance on harming somebody when the whole point of it is that gift of life? I saw so many of my friends die, and that was something I had never experienced before. And it was a sense of helplessness. There was nothing you could do. No one would take your blood, even to give it to somebody that had AIDS. There was just, you were just put out to pasture.
Despite these precautionary measures, in 1985, the worst fears of the blood bank staff are realized. Contaminated blood from the blood bank leads to a case of post-transfusion AIDS.
The worst fear of any medical director at the time in the early 80s when this was going on with the HIV experience is to have an individual case come out of your own blood bank. And we did have such a case.
The patient eventually dies from the disease, contracted after receiving 1 pint of infected blood at a local hospital in 1984. Meanwhile, there are other, more systemic financial pressures coming to bear as well on blood banks around the country. Hospitals, squeezed by new government limits on reimbursement for care, are in turn pressuring blood banks to charge less, while the costs to test and process blood at the blood banks escalate. Blood banks must share the pain the hospitals are feeling or face the threat of them going elsewhere for less costly blood.
Blood is a two-edged sword. It has the potential of saving lives and also giving diseases. The sensitivity of the blood community has gotten so escalated that we have had to add test upon test upon test. And one of the big first problems that we had with blood was hepatitis. We had that solved when we started to get a test for hepatitis B. We had no idea about hepatitis C or the other ones at the time. Then HIV came, and then other potentials came right on the back of HIV, sending the cost of blood through the roof.
In the 80s, we began to see the change in leadership in the community. The greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw calls it, was aging, and the baby boomers were beginning to step up, and there was a change in attitude, particularly in civic attitude in terms of volunteerism. More emphasis on making money, on getting rich, and less emphasis on doing the right thing for the town.
The mid-'80s bring other dramatic changes. On April 10, 1984, Fred Daniels resigns his position as board president because of ill health. At the annual dinner meeting, he is honored by members and guests and is presented with a plaque commemorating his 35 years of service to the blood bank. The following year, to counter the widespread misconception that the Sonoma County Community Blood Bank is solely a county agency, its name is changed to Blood Bank of the Redwoods, which better reflects the three-county area it now serves. That year, the blood bank collects over 17,000 units of blood. The following year, Blood Bank of the Redwoods moves into a new building at the corner of Yulupa Avenue and Bethards, which serves as their final location.
I started working with the blood bank when they were in the new building. And it's amazing what the energy level is when you've got a group of people coming together, excited about where they are and what they do. It's like the energy of a startup. And their startup was to begin to work together as a business, not just a nonprofit.
10-year employee Kathy Bryan, who started as a receptionist in the 1970s, is named the new managing director and eventually becomes CEO and president. She will be the third and final woman to head the blood bank, joining her predecessors Agnes Barlow and Lee Sawyer.
I think it's a unique opportunity for our community to have had 3 women run the blood center. Agnes was involved from the beginning, and I think her presence took its own form. She obviously made herself indispensable. What you could see was someone who was willing to be the focal point. Lee had been there about 10 years, had been a operational, do-everything employee, Agnes's right hand. She wanted to leave behind a legacy. She was the one to create that building, leave her mark with the building as well as with the new name, Blood Bank of the Redwoods. Well, I started in 1977, and I was fortunate enough to see the community blood bank environment that I read about from the past. Everyone in the building knew each other. The employees were all friendly. We all knew the donors. The donors were our friends. It was what I had always thought community not-for-profits were all about the people.
As the 1980s transition into the 1990s, financial pressures on blood banks are an increasing burden. Hospitals continue to pressure blood banks to reduce costs. In the wake of the AIDS crisis, the FDA forces blood banks to institute more stringent and more costly safety measures. The American Red Cross and many hospitals abandon the national blood policy. This brings new and aggressive competition. A hospital served by one regional blood bank can now be solicited by others. In the price-cutting wars that follow, smaller community blood banks begin to lose.
And in a really short period of time, there were more than a half dozen tests being applied to every pint of blood that was being drawn. But no one was willing to pay for that. And so Blood Bank had to figure out a way to absorb all of those costs and still keep their product price the same to the open market.
Blood Bank of the Redwoods enters this new millennium within this troubled milieu. Despite the turmoil, by 2008, they employ more than 150 people. They draw 45,000 units of blood and pass a significant milestone: the 1 millionth pint of blood collected and put back into the community bloodstream by BBR staff. But with the national economy floundering and national health care in a state of flux, hospitals are forced to look at their blood providers more closely than ever. The local hospitals served by the Blood Bank of the Redwoods are no exception. During the last decade of the blood bank's life, 3 hospitals, Kaiser, Sutter, and Santa Rosa Memorial, clearly become the major hospitals in the area and therefore their 3 main customers. In June of 2008, after an outstanding 60-year community relationship with Blood